welcome to the Fireside chat called Wi-Fi No Password. No, okay, that was a joke, obviously. Okay. Thank you for being here. I know it's Friday evening, 4 o'clock. We are standing between, you all put
between them and drinks.
Right, exactly, happy hour. So we'll try to make this interesting. My name is Echambad. I am the Senior Associate Dean at the College of Business, and my research is in the area of technology issues. And of course, as Chida said, we have Mike Brown here, CTO of ComScore. And Mike, I thought I'll talk a little bit about your background and connect it to the topic that we have today. Mike has a bachelor's and master's in computer science. And after that, he was employed at IBM. He was an entrepreneur for a while, founded a company called Pragmatic Image. He was one of the earliest employees at ComScore. But what stunned me, I've known ComScore for a while, but what stunned me about ComScore is it processes 1.9 trillion global transactions monthly. And ComScore is a cross-platform measurement company that measures brands, audiences, and consumer behaviors across multiple platforms, including movies, digital, and TV. So it's an ambitious endeavor. So the purpose of this fireside chat, when Chida called us, Chida basically asked us to talk about the interface of business and technology. As we know that this is the golden age of technology here, especially in the last 3-4 decades, with the evolution of PCs, cell phones, internet, social media, digital devices, genome sequencing, and with upcoming virtual reality and machine learning, we are actually entering into a new era. So what Chida wanted to do was to kind of focus on broad trends in business, as you will. And therefore, Mike came up with this topic. And the topic is actually scale, innovation, massive democratization, and disruption. So I'm going to start off by asking Mike the following 2 questions. Mike, what does this topic mean? And second, how does it connect to the work that you do at ComScore?
Yeah, so the idea behind this was how can we go ahead and take large-scale sets of data, make it useful for lots of people, and be disruptive from a business model perspective, but actually is beneficial to your organization, but then also to all your clients, right? So I think that was the idea behind of scale, infrastructure, massive democratization, and et cetera, because it goes ahead and allows people to go ahead and use data, right? One of the things I've learned over and over and have witnessed since I've been at ComScore is getting people access to the data, right? Too long, data has been in silos or in protected areas. But if you give people the ability to get their hands dirty, be able to hook up with it and play with it, they can create new things on their own. So it's not so much about what should come down from the top, but how do you build it up from the top, from the bottom? And I think that's really the idea behind it, from the ability to take a large set of data and democratize it to lots of people, because the more people have eyes on the data, the better the products, the better the innovations will be that comes out of that.
Okay, so the second part to that question is, how does that relate to the work that you do at ComScore? We already know the scale of data that you're dealing with. But as far as the innovation part, as far as the democratization part, how does it actually connect to your day-to-day work at ComScore?
Yeah, 2 different ways. So just internally, right, it's about taking and building out systems that not just a certain set of people can get at, but that many people can get at, right? So you're having it in a way that the data is accessible in multiple different systems through multiple different paradigms, whether they like to go write, Hadoop jobs in Pig or Java, or they like to access it in SQL. The part is you should make the data available to the people at large. But then from a customer perspective, how do you go ahead and take that data and make it useful for thousands of clients? Right, so it's the idea of it's not just what your panel says, but it's the ability of taking all of the sensor data and actually working and collaborating with clients to say, let's not just take what our data says, but let's work together to make the data the most actionable and realistic data available out in the marketplace. And I think that's some of the things that we've done over the course of the company's history, that it's not just been about what we say, or it's our autocratic, this is how it should be, but it's about how we have gone ahead and tried to really collaborate with our clients and have the clients provide guidance to us. And it's not through the more traditional methods of like advisory boards and things like that, but it's part of the process. It's part of the individual product, and it's how each product actually comes to market.
So I'm going to briefly take some moment. We have here Rashri Agarwal, my co-author, who's a professor at the University of Maryland. And Rashri and I have done a lot of work in the area of technology innovation. And fundamentally, if you ask me in an elevator, of all the papers that you have published, what is one that is worth the trip? We'll basically, and I hope, Rashri, you agree with this, is our paper on employee entrepreneurship. Why do employees leave very successful incumbents and leave pecuniary prospects and go and start something on their own? And we did it in the disk drive industry. We studied the disk drive industry for a 20-year period, et cetera. But what expertise I bring to this topic is, of course, I work at the University of Illinois, and it's a land grant mission. The land grant mission, was actually set up by President Lincoln, actually, about 160 years ago. And the University of Illinois actually turns 150 next year. And if you think about it, it was a radical concept by itself. When education was privy to only the elite, if you will. University of Illinois was fundamentally about land grant mission, democratizing education, et cetera. But anyway, using our background in innovation, we started an online MBA program this year. We launched it this year, but we announced it last year. And to this date, at a broader level, it's a high-quality program. It's an affordable program. But the broader aspect of it is a disruptive product. And so it is also something that we are reaching all over the world. It's a massive, it's a product of massive scale. We have already reached about 500,000 people around the world and so on. But at a broader level, though, one of the things that I want to connect, Mike, is I want to ask, if time permitting, I want to ask 3 questions, if you will. And the first question is connected to this whole notion of disruption. And I want to get your perspective on what disruption means. And as you are looking at consumer behaviors around the world, what does disruption mean to you from a practitioner perspective? But before that, for the benefit of the audience, what I thought I will do is, disruption, obviously you've heard this term over and over and over again in magazines. Everything is disruptive. I cross the road, it is disruptive, But at a broader level, the definition of disruptive for me is when you create a product that is targeted towards underserved markets. Think Blockbuster and Netflix. Netflix came up with a product that was targeted towards an underserved market, a connoisseur market, such that the mainstream market doesn't value this particular product, so it is marginalized. But at the broader level, and the reason why it is important for technologists is there is usually a technology trigger in all these disruptions. When you think about Netflix, it was the DVD. When you think about Amazon.com, it was the internet. When you think about Facebook, it was actually the internet and it was the Web 2.0 and so on. There's usually a technology trigger. And so at a broader level, this is a fascinating topic for technologists. As you are thinking about developing products and so on, you start thinking about disruption. But before I ask my question to Mike, one of the sobering statistics out there is less than 9% of incumbents ever survive a disruptive onslaught. That's basically the number that is out there, and that is why CEOs and leaders of companies are really, really, really worried about disruption. So Mike, my question to you is, as you've examined the data, as you've looked at these various things out there, what should companies do? How should they look at consumer behavior in terms of either tackling disruptions or creating disruptions themselves?
Yeah, a core belief that we had from a ComScore perspective was the history of market research has always been about get a set of users. It's called a panel, right? You build a sample, you observe everything they do, et cetera. But those things are really hard to find, right? You have to go out and you have to ask people to do something, you have to get things and like that. And our first go at this was we built a really large panel, about 2 million people under measurement worldwide, right? Which is a decent sized panel. But, I mean, there's 365 million people in the US, right? There's 8.1 billion people in the world, right? 2 million to 8 billion is some pretty big math, right? And you're going to miss a whole lot of folks. So really, from a disruption perspective, and I know a lot of stuff from things from business literature talk about being disruptive from a product and going after an underserved. But you can take disruption in a lot of different ways, and the way I look at it from a technology perspective is, how can you use technology to be disruptive? And what I'm saying there is, we said, hold on a second. We're looking at what's happening and from a clients back in 2009, and we said, hold on a second. All these clients are, one of our core issues is people are calling up and saying, well, our data says this, your data says that, and we're saying, well, it's a panel, it's a little bit different. We start talking about it. We want to say, well, how do we make this easy? How do we just make this problem go away? And what we said is, well, hold on a second. The clients are coming to us. They want the right data. They want it to be the most accurate thing out there. Maybe they'll work with us. Well, what do you mean work with us? Well, what if we go ahead and ask the client to put a little piece of code on every web page? Right? And this is what launched the idea internally called unified digital measurement. Yes?
Maybe it's just me. The voice seems to be getting a lot of echo and it comes out very muddy.
Oh. Is that better? Is that better? Better? Is that better? Yes? Thanks. It's always amazing how the tech guy has technical challenges. So where I was going with this, we launched this effort called UDM. And the idea was asking clients that if they wanted to make the data better or get the most actionable data or accurate data, let's work together. And we asked people to go ahead and put a piece of code on each web page, which we thought was kind of crazy. And we're like, hold on a second, that's like trillions of events. Can we go ahead and scale up from what we were dealing with, a panel of 2 million people, to be able to handle all of these web pages? And that's how we went from handling, just a couple billion events a day to 65 billion events a day, right? And this kind of went ahead and basically produced, great returns from a business perspective because we became the dominant player in the audience research business in the world, right, from a digital perspective.
Right.
So I think that's a big thing that people can go ahead and take a look at from, you can use technology or take the abilities of technology to capture large volumes of data. And that gives you an understanding. Now, what was, from a product perspective, was nice because it gave you access to the whole long tail, right? You got to see all activities, whether it was happening in the US or China or India, and you had 100% accounting of what the difference was. So we could explain to our clients like what they were seeing on a machine basis and compare it to what our product is, which is telling about what people do online. And we can compare and contrast the ratio of people to machines.
So for people who are interested here, technologists who are amazing with their technology, and who understand the architecture of how to do these kinds of things from a supply side, what would be your prescription to how should they start looking at it from a demand side?
I think the biggest thing that people should look at is be open to be thinking outside the box. Go ahead and look at what are the things and ask the question that is, what is the hardest problem? Right? What is the problem that hasn't been solved? Or what is the problem that everybody thinks will fail? First of all, if you work on that problem and you fail, this is the expected result. No one's going to be like, oh, he failed because everybody else had failed before you. But if you succeed, it's unbelievable, right? Because you can really change the equation. I think that's the big thing. Don't be afraid to take on a project that is really hard that other people have failed on. Because if you fail, that was the expected result.
Right. So one thing that I say to all the executives and managers that I deal with, Mike, is to think about the definition of the business itself from a customer point of view. If you ask, what is the business that Kodak is in, I don't know how many people here know this, but Kodak was one of the earliest pioneers in the digital cameras, right? But the reason why they didn't commercialize it, and I'm giving a very simplistic explanation, is they thought they were in the film camera business, right? And Polaroid had actually had one of the earliest cameras, didn't succeed in the long run, in fact, became bankrupt about 4 or 5 years ago. Again, thought of themselves in a very narrow niche. The one firm that actually survived and did fairly well is the Fuji film company, because they defined themselves in the image business. So one point could be to build on your point, Mike, that we start thinking about business definition in an abstract term, in terms of what is the benefit that we are giving to the customers. Technology is a means to an end. The end has to be, there has to be a customer benefit, and that customer benefit has to be better, probably faster or cheaper or whatever it is. But the fact of the matter is the benefit should be perceived by the company. And for technologists to exist in silos and create a product because it is the best mousetrap that they've ever built without understanding if the market values it and what does the market perceive to be the needs, I think is fairly critical.
Yeah, I think the best way is to ask yourself, not necessarily what's out there on the hallways as to what's the vision or the mission statements or something like that, but why are customers coming to you? Why are customers using your product? What is the insight? What do they trust you for? What don't they trust you for? Right? What is the thing that makes them come to you and are willing to exchange money? And I think you can use that as a guiding light to help try to understand what type of things and build upon that to say it, because technology is all about change. Was hip 20 years ago is kind of not exactly hip anymore.
That's right.
But technology allows us to meet those challenges and lets us deal with the scale, because one thing that has happened over time is, you used to be a big application when you only had like a couple hundred users. And now everybody's talking about how you're doing applications serving millions or billions. And I think that's the biggest change that technology allows us to deal with it, is you get to actually, the technology is there to do it now.
So I want to change gears slightly, Mike, and I want to talk about the second trend that's happening in the business world, which is very applicable to the technologies here. The world is actually moving from what we call as a pipeline to a platform-centric view, if you will. And for those of you who need some definitions, platform is defined as, at least at a minimum, two-sided, right? You go to let's say, an Android operating system, or Android system, if you will. You have the apps on one side that are developed by people like you, and you have the users. So it's two-sided, if you will. And Android is basically a platform, or iOS is basically a platform where you have apps on one side and the users on the other, et cetera. And what is happening actually in the last 5-6 years is the growth of platforms as opposed to pipeline. Pipeline is Procter & Gamble trying to produce a Tide detergent, so they source the materials, they do the operations themselves, they package it, they market it, and send it out. It's a series of activities, if you will. And so one classic example is that of the iPhone. When iPhone was launched, as you know, 90% of global profits existed with 5 companies, with Nokia, with Motorola, with Sony Ericsson, with Samsung and LG. And iPhone comes in, takes over the world. And the long-term success of iPhone is the way it visualized the platform, because it moved from a product-centric company to a platform-centric company. So Mike, given your experiences with ComScore, given what you see out there in the marketplace and so on and so forth, what are your comments about the movement from the product-centric view to the platform-centric view, and again, prescriptions for our audience here?
I think one of the biggest things that I learned through the history of what we went through from our company is, when we first started out, we were saying, well, this is how the site is. This is how the site is defined. And we were being very, very dictatorial on this is how it is, right? This is what a dictionary is, and this is how it should be categorized. And that was okay to start, but we didn't really have that much success, to be honest. When we went ahead and started adopting a model where we said, let's collaborate with our clients. Let's see what the clients, how they think they should be classified, and then how they should organize their site. And it wasn't about, oh, we think this site should be this way. What ended up happening by engaging a dialogue with the clients, they ended up using their units of how they would sell ad inventory on their web pages. They would publish that information to us. And that became this whole, like, now it went from just being like, this is the information, where the platform is the ecosystem, right? Where you became part of the ecosystem because we were defining how they would sell units of inventory on their websites. Because this is the kind of traffic or the kind of numbers or the type of demographics that would be on that site. And then they would build and enhance that to try to get the type of rankings. So by using our broader kind of classifications and then submitting information to us, that's basically how we became the storefront of how they marketed sections of their web page or their web properties. Right? And I think that's the important thing to think about is when you engage with the clients, with your clients, think about how that can be something that both sides can have some give and take. And based on that give and take, allow that to flourish, and then you can get new things like ecosystems or things that happen. Internally, it's if you're in the web advertising space, you'll hear, what's your ComScore number? And we're like, well, that was kind of a cool thing when you start hearing that kind of come about, is because what that means is the number of uniques people that are visiting this defined piece. But that defined piece is up to the publisher to define. And that was the big thing from a breakthrough perspective that enabled the initial early success of the Media Metrics product.
So I'm going to go back to this iPhone example again, Mike. By the way, this whole movement from pipeline to platform is new, and that is because of the digital nature of our business right now. But in the physical world, we always had pipelines. Think of malls. They were actually platforms, if you will. So you have high-end anchor stores, and you have number of users. If you don't have those stores, those users don't show up. And if you don't have users, you can't have your anchor stores there. So that is a platform. Or when you think of newspapers, that's a platform. When you have advertisers on one side and users on the other, or the subscribers, you have to have both. But the reason why platforms are very critical in the digital world is because it is frictionless. The costs are very low. You can easily do it using technology, right? Think of Uber, for instance. It has, one side of the equation, having only drivers will lead to catastrophic failure if you don't have passengers. And if you have just passengers and not enough drivers, again, this is going to be a problem. So it's not a new thing, but it's basically the network effects. But going back to the iPhone example, Mike, and this is true of iPad as well. When you think about their evolution from the product to the platform, they didn't start off as a platform company, right?
No, yeah, they started off as a product company. It was like, you look at it, originally it was a device that looked really cool. It basically merged 3 functions onto one device. But from a platform perspective, it really didn't take off until really 2009, 2010, when they allowed anybody to write an app. And what they did is they just created okay, here's the process of how you get an app approved, and they provided a way for people to discovery of apps, and now you get to the situation where there's like millions of apps out there. And I think that's an important part where, that's where you went from it's a product mentality to a platform mentality, because now they were bringing the ability for having access to lots of that, and that was, it's a huge win for Apple, but it's a huge win for lots of people that could go off and just create their own apps.
So it's fundamentally the ecosystem value that you worry about.
Exactly.
Which leads me to the third question, Mike. You have talked about scale. Our topic had scale. And especially in a digital world, as opposed to the physical world, is there a difference in terms of scale? Does scale mean very different things in the physical world as opposed to the digital world?
Oh, I think it does tremendously. I mean, I think it's, scale in the physical world is, you have a dimension of how fast you can. I was thinking about this because I ordered the new iPhone, right? So I was thinking, like, how are they getting these millions of iPhones from the factories in Shenzhen to the U.S.? Are they just taking? I'm just thinking, like, are they having like 747s and they're just stuffing it forward, et cetera? But this is a good example from a physical world. Like, if you are going ahead and you're selling, toothpicks or whatever product it would be, you'd have to build out factories to make that, and there's a time to do that. So the difference in the digital space is you now have capabilities, whether it's Google Compute or AWS or Oracle Cloud, whatever. You have the capability now to quickly build out the capacity to handle trillions or multiple trillions of events on a day, if you wanted to, right? Because you have the ability to scale out. It's just whether you have the intellectual capacity to go ahead and plan for how you want to evolve the system. But I think that's the biggest thing from the digital space is the time it takes to go from one thing to a million in the digital space is only limited by the number of CPU cycles.
Perfect.
Where in the physical space, there's a lot of friction. And there's a lot of different things you have to get. So it takes time just to build a warehouse.
Right. And one other thing is obviously the digital world is a long tail world. To put it in layman's terms. I was just reading the statistic the other day. Barnes & Noble physical store carries about 130,000 titles in their physical store. And that is less than 20% of revenues for Amazon.com. Those titles actually produce between 20 to 25% for Amazon.com, which effectively means 75% of Amazon's revenues from the books are not even available in Barnes & Noble, right? And one of the larger points that I want to make here is this has huge implications for you as developers. When you look at an existing company and you look at an existing solution, there is always a mirror weakness. Blockbuster in 2001 was the most famous video rental company, 5,000 stores. 70% of the American population could reach the nearest Blockbuster in 10 minutes. Whereas if you ordered something off Netflix, it would take you 4 days. But for all the strengths that Blockbuster had, 97% equity, people knew what a Blockbuster was. But the fundamental thing about Blockbuster at that point in time was they could only stock movies that had very fast inventory, right? If I wanted Gone with the Wind, you couldn't get it from Blockbuster because the cycle was not enough for them to store,
it wasn't worth the shelf space.
It wasn't worth the shelf space, if you will. So it's the long tail argument where when you have a Netflix and you have one warehouse and one Gone with the Wind can take care of your audiences. So fundamentally, the move is from a short tail or a symmetric bell curve, if you will, which is you're thinking about a Blockbuster, as opposed to a long tail where you can make money of many unique things, if you will. So that has been a major change, I think, which enables people to actually cater to these digital innovations faster and better, if you will, right?
Yeah, I think there's things you need to expect that that you could, looking at data and trying to understand what's happening from a long-term perspective, you'll see interesting things. So, for instance, the biggest traffic day that we ever see from an observational perspective, guess what day it is?
Friday.
No, just day of the year.
Day of the year?
Yeah.
I would say it's the day before Thanksgiving.
Nope. Believe it or not, it's the day after the Oscars.
Wow.
Everybody's looking all the dresses. It is amazing. The amount of volume of pictures people are looking at the red carpet, reading more about it, and things like that. It's just it's just like a date that you don't think about, but you think if you think about it, well, it's very content heavy, very media heavy. It's being written up in Facebook and Yahoo and all the different types of things. It drives an incredible amount of traffic from just a media consumption perspective. And now this is not a statistic compared to like a Netflix kind of bandwidth perspective, but that's an area that you can look at that's like, but it makes a lot of sense to do that.
Right. And so, we have a few minutes left to go. So what I thought I will do is open the floor up for questions, if you have any questions. Yes.
One of the things, Joe, one of the things that perhaps we do as, quote, technologists, say that technology is the center of the universe, and it's the cause of all of the disruption, and we're the ones that can change the universe. How have you seen the transition between the number of people using computers and those of us involved with them? My picture is that how are we finding out what things, what valuable services or products people that are not like us
That's right.
can use, rather than how we can change or disrupt things that we're already serving? I sometimes worry that we're a little too insular.
Right.
The biggest disruptor we have this year is Donald Trump. He's not doing a bit of that technology.
Or
How do we work to discover services and products that are valuable to the human populace that we can impact, rather than finding some business niche that we'll disrupt by doing something different?
Well, I thank you for that question. I'm going to repeat that question for those of you in the back. So the question is, technologists can sometimes be insular, therefore the products that we produce, or let me reframe it, how do we produce products that can be impactful by accounting for the needs of people who are not like us, correct? Okay. So again, this goes back to the first question. By the way, I'm going to say something to you. Technologists do an amazing thing in the world, right? Without technology, I was actually talking about it to other people, the wines that we have at Walmart are better than the wines that the French kings actually drank. So that is why when I give my $2 chucks to my father-in-law for Christmas, I always send a note saying this is better than the wine that King Louis XIV drank, Or when you look at the life expectancy today, 82 years. An average 5-year-old can expect to live 82 years today as opposed to 55 about 150 years ago. So there are lots of advances that we have done, and fundamentally it's because of technology, et cetera. But your point is broader, it's well taken. So the way I would say it, and I'm going to let Mike take the next shot, is I always say to people, go back, and this concept is called marketing myopia, for those of you who want to Google this. Marketing myopia prevents you from becoming insular because you define in terms of the needs of the consumer. Because if you are in the film camera business and the film camera changes to digital camera and the digital camera changes to smartphone, you are out of the business, right? But if you define yourself in terms of capturing memories, you will always be there because you are going to identify the needs and so on, right? So at a broader level, I would say to you, identify the pain point from a consumer point of view. And this works actually both ways. One, I see this in the real world. People over-engineer products, and we call it overshooting. Or sometimes they think their solution is so trivial that the market will not value it. And that's not true. And the way to think about it is through market research, do a focus group with consumers, et cetera. But understand that you do not have all the answers. Sometimes it is better to co-create with your consumers. And the larger point is never let perfect be the enemy of the very good. You need to say, here is a prototype. I'm going to experiment. I'm going to iterate. I'm going to get it better. And over time, it will evolve to be a good product, if you will.
Yeah, I'm going to answer a little bit. One of the most interesting things I ever had to do when I was working for a company as a leader, and one of the things was they sent me to sales training. Right? I learned this thing in sales training that people buy on emotion. Right? So I think to answer the question specifically, what are the things that we as technologists can do to try to create products that help people, is try to understand the things that would drive emotion. Right? Whether that is, fear, with very strong emotion, or joy, or lust, right? I mean, I think some of the initial things from the success of the iPhone, picking that product, is it was lust. People saw this device that was one thing, and that was that people were buying based on emotion, right? In a lot of ways, it was it was harder to work. It didn't connect into my Exchange or BlackBerry, but people found a way to work around it because they lusted for the device. So I think to answer it in a very broadly based way is look what is out there that could trigger an emotional response or be something that solves an emotional problem. And then you can use technology to solve for it. I mean, I know that's probably dealt with in the marketing things in a slightly different way, but to me, it's if you create something that's really cool, will that cool trigger or solve for an emotional response? And that's how you drive sales. Because in the end, that's how you build a successful enterprise.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Okay.
Awesome.
So thank you again. Thank you for...
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Right,
Much appreciated.
Thank you. Fantastic.